Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
See, some things are permanent. For those of you who are here the first time, I like to start my talks off with some music. So. I really enjoy coming to this Sangha. So today what I'd like to talk about is the teacher-student relationship in the Dharma. Because one of the things that's happening in the United States is, and I think also in Europe, as the Dharma comes west, is a big question in Sanghas and Dharma communities is what is the relationship we want to have between those who teach the Dharma and those who are students of the Dharma. And there's a wide range of models to understand this relationship. So, especially for those of you who are new, if people have questions while I'm giving my talk, please feel free to raise your hand, because I don't mind being. You don't have to wait till I give permission to ask questions. I think part of the problem in the West is that there's very little precedent for the spiritual teacher aspiring student relationship. There's very, very little cultural models for us. That's one of the differences between the Orient and the West. So that in the Orient, there's a lot of stories and cultural references for people to understand this relationship. And in the West, there's very few examples of this. It's virtually non-existent, actually. So we're treading new ground, and I think that causes a lot of confusion with people, simply because everybody's floundering, both the teachers and the students, trying to figure out how this is going to work in this cultural context. I am personally of the opinion that it's very important to have a teacher. I think it's a crucial element. The three refuges in Buddhism are the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. So the Dharma is the teaching, and there's a strong tendency in our individualistic culture to believe that I can do it myself. But if you've ever taken home some furniture in an unassembled state and tried to put it together, especially if you're not a carpenter or you're not that's just a very simple example of not being able to do it yourself. And the Dharma is much more subtle than that. In terms of the three refuges, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, the Dharma means the teaching. In the Dharma, the Buddha, of course, means the enlightened one, but in a larger context, it refers to those teachers who are transmitting the Dharma. And the Sangha means a group of practitioners, like all of us in this room. All three need to be present for a full practice. Our rugged individualism tends to make that difficult for us to accept, that we need all three, that we need a community, we need a teacher or a guide. It's the middle one, the Dharma, that's okay. Because it's been my experience over the years when observing people that there's two tendencies among students when they first join a group or hook up with a teacher. And one is to consider the teacher like the kind of teacher you had when you were in school. So the learning about the Dharma is going to be the same as taking a college course. It's interesting. One of my favorite stories about that is when Bobby Rhodes first began teaching. Someone came in for an interview during a retreat and said, I have been meditating for 6 months and nothing has happened. This very accusatory voice. You know, like, and you know, but when you think about it, 6 months, half a year, a semester, you know, there should be something, you know, like something should have, you know, like should be going on to the next step, you know, like There's also, our culture is very strongly committed to instant gratification, like very strongly committed to instant gratification. And the Dharma is, it is subtle and it's also long-term. For example, the effects of meditation might not manifest for quite a few years after practice. When I say quite a few years, I mean like 15. And the transformation that occurs to meditation is often not dramatic. Over and over and over again, I've seen in my own practice and in my observation of others that I only come to realize how meditation has affected my life when I get feedback from other people. And then it's like, oh, that used to drive you crazy. I'm glad we can talk about that now. You know, without you, you know, like getting all bristly, you know, it's something like that. And then, you know, like you go, oh yeah, I used to not, you know, like that used to drive me crazy. It doesn't drive me crazy. Maybe that has something to do with my meditation. You know, like, you know, like that kind of feedback. There's a strong desire for people to, for practice to be dramatic. And a lot of the meditation literature is centered around dramatic episodes. It's like kenshos or satori's or mystical experiences that, because it makes great literature. You know, like, I mean, but you'll find that meditation and practice manifesting in everyday situations, you know, to my mind is more important than having some sort of great cosmic experience. You know, it's like, can you stand in line at the grocery store without getting really pissed off at that slow checker? You know, things like that. You know, like that kind of equanimity in day-to-day situations is where the importance of practice lies. You know, how that manifests. You know? When I talk about the subtlety of the Dharma, which is one reason why we all need a teacher, take, for example, the idea of impermanence. All right. So that's a central teaching of the Buddha Dharma, that all things are impermanent. So, you know, there's the intellectual understanding of that idea, and then there's the realization of that idea. And the realization of that idea is quite subtle. It also can create, initially it can create a great deal of discomfort, you know, like diving into impermanence. So here's, people can have an intellectual understanding, but you know, impermanence has a lot to do with death and dying. And people who have a very strong intellectual understanding of impermanence can nevertheless be surprised when they are told by their doctor, this is it. Like, see, a deep understanding of impermanence means that when the time of death comes to you, that will not come as a shock. You know, that will not come as a surprise. You know, like, that's one clue. You know, like to the understanding of impermanence, or one clue is to its subtlety. You know? Impermanence also applies to, you know, ideals and ideologies and areas that we might not ordinarily think of them. Like, you know, I can say that this room is impermanent, or my clothes are impermanent, or the flowers on the altar are impermanent. But when you come to say, for example, that the United States of America is impermanent, you're reaching a whole other level of one's understanding. And for some people that would be, for many people, that would be, you know, like, oh yeah? You know, like, or there are other kinds of ideals and ideologies, like the human species is impermanent. You know, something like that. So as you unpack the meaning of impermanence, that understanding deepens and spreads, and connects. So the ability to unpack that requires, in my opinion, some guidance, some understanding, a community where you can bring that, like, I've had the experience so many times of both myself and among my students, the Sangha, like they've been meditating and something comes up, like some kind of resistance say, boy, I was thinking about impermanence and that really bothered me. Like, for example, it really bothered me that my children are impermanent, something like that. And almost always there's someone else in the group who will say, oh yeah, I went through that. Like, I had that experience. That's very supportive. That's very important to get that kind of feedback and not feel like you're isolated. In our culture, you see, like the spiritual quest is not culturally supported, right? So you turn on your TV, there's not going to be, News at 11, tips on the spiritual path. You're not going to get that kind of feedback and support from the culture at large. So, like a community of practitioners is really very helpful, in this, particularly in our kind of cultural context. I like to, talking specifically about the teacher and the models for teaching, there's all sorts of words in our language for teacher. There's teacher, master, mentor, guide, friend, and a lot of us adopted the word guru or lama. Lama is the Tibetan word for guru. And the way I understand this kind of relationship is by putting it on a continuum. At one end you have the teacher, and at the other end you have the guru. So that's kind of the scale I've constructed. The teacher I was referring to earlier is like the academic teacher. Like you're going to take a course. In this model, there is very little what I call heart connection between the individual taking the course and the person teaching the course. So, if you think back on high school or grade school, college, you really don't know your teacher at all. It's a way of conveying information and data. It would be very useful, for example, learning about the Four Noble Truths, the 6 perfections, or the 10 perfections, that kind of information, or history of Buddhism, right? Oh, there's another model, I'm sorry, but I need to backtrack. I was talking about my experience with people, Westerners approaching the Buddhist teacher, and they seem to fall very quickly into 2 camps. One is that teacher model, and the other is what I call the therapeutic model, that they view their teachers as therapists, who, because there is an overlap between meditation and therapy, often people will view the meditation teacher as someone to whom they can bring their personal problems. Now, there are a significant number of Western teachers who are also trained in therapy. But what I want to put out here is that just because someone is a good meditation teacher does not necessarily make them a good therapist. The 2 functions are different. They are different in this way. The therapy is primarily about autobiography. Therapy is primarily about autobiography. Meditation in the Dharma is about transcending one's autobiography. So, like when the Buddha talked about the human condition, he said all human beings, have the course of birth, sickness, old age, and death. So that's not primarily your autobiography or your situation. Like that's a universal situation. So the focus of the Dharma is on that universal situation. Now, once again, I'm not saying the two are opposed to each other. The two can significantly reinforce each other. But the point I'm making is just because someone is a good Dharma teacher does not, by that fact, make them a good therapist. And I'm putting that out because it seems to me a common and understandable mistake that people make. If you need a therapist, go to a good therapist. But to return to that model of that I was talking about, you have the teacher at one end, the academic teacher, and at the other end you have the guru or lama. And in that model, you are to view the guru as the embodiment of perfection. And the advantage of this model is that it establishes an extremely strong and intense heart connection between the teacher and the student. There's no more intimate model than that. The Dharma is primarily about the wisdom of the heart. It's not primarily about acquiring intellectual understanding. The wisdom of the heart means something quite specific. It means understanding the interconnectedness of all things, and then being able to function in the world from that understanding. So having the understanding that all things are interconnected, what the Buddha called dependent origination, and then being able to function from that understanding happens in the heart, not in the head. Because the head is the center of discrimination. Discrimination means to separate, to separate out. The heart is the center which reweaves the world back together and perceives the world as an interdependent network of cause and effect. Now, in order to understand this on an experiential level, if you will contemplate something that you feel gratitude for spontaneously, so your own mind, think of something, someone that you feel very grateful for, a feeling arises in the center of the chest. That's how we know we feel grateful. Gratefulness is the feeling of being connected to something. Gratefulness is the door to the understanding of dependent origination. Dependent origination means the interconnectedness of all things. When that feeling is present, that wisdom, that Dharma wisdom, is beginning to blossom. That's how you know it's there. See, understanding by itself is not enough. But does this make sense?
Wonderfully so.
Oh, good. All right, so in the guru relationship, that is emphasized, that heart connection to the guru. You are to view the guru as the embodiment of perfection, the guru as the vessel of the Dharma, and because the Dharma is so wonderful, you have this spontaneous feeling of gratefulness, and that is the foundation from which the wisdom of the Dharma can blossom. So, in that sense, it's a very pure way of actualizing Dharma wisdom. The dangers of the guru relationship are that what do you do when your guru is like ordinary and human? What do you do with that information? Because at a certain, you're supposed to view the guru as perfection, like deity yoga. So when the guru, say, tells them a white lie, or or something like that, it can create in the disciple, and students in the guru relationship are called disciples. It can create an enormous amount of tension in the student. It's like how to handle this. And there are all sorts of ways that people in a relationship like that do handle it. For example, they say, well, it's not really what it appears to be. Or it's some sort of covert teaching that I don't understand yet.
Isn't crazy wisdom always the catch-all explanation?
Yeah, or it's crazy wisdom, right? Like on the one hand, it has its, and this is true of all the ones I'm describing, the relationships I'm describing. All of them have their pluses and minuses. If you are getting involved in a guru disciple relationship, then that's what's in store for you, and the foundation of that is trust. I prefer the word trust to faith, incidentally, because and I believe the word shin in Chinese, I don't know the Sanskrit word, that has been translated as faith into English is not quite right, because faith has a lot of implications in English, which I don't believe the Chinese word shin, not the shin that's mine, but sorry, I can't remember the tone, it's a different shin, that doesn't occur in Chinese. Faith in English often means blind faith. Blind faith. So, whereas trust, you trust someone because you have reason to believe that they are, in some sense, authentic. See, in all of these relationships, the core issue is trust. And at the beginning, for example, take when you first begin to meditate, and you have an instructor. You have no experience meditating. So there has to be a certain minimal level of trust between you and the teacher, and between you and the Sangha, even to begin. Because, I'm from the Zen tradition, so the first time people do Zazen, it's like, their knees hurt, their back hurts, and their mind is blabbering away like 5 radio stations. This is great. If there isn't trust there, that eventually, your posture will take care of itself, and eventually, your mind will settle down. Then there's no reason to go any further. Because it's very much like a mentor relationship, and I often use a musical model. So it's like if you learn to study keyboard, one of the first things students do when new students is they put their hands on the keyboard and they drop their wrists like this because it's comfortable, to lean your wrist on the edge of the keyboard, sort of play like this. And the teacher always goes, wrist up, like that. And it feels awkward. It feels really awkward, when you first start. But if you trust the teacher, you'll do that, and sure enough, in a couple of months you realize, this really makes a difference. And so it's that kind of relationship that I'm talking about. There has to be some minimal level of trust. So you have the academic teacher, and you have the guru. In the middle of that, I would place what I call the mentor or guide. So the mentor is more intimate than the academic teacher. If you think of, say, someone apprenticing to a master carpenter, or apprenticing to a music teacher. So the relationship is that's a good way to describe it, mentor-apprentice. So in the guru relationship, this is interesting. In the guru relationship, it is not possible for the student to surpass the guru, because the guru is the embodiment of perfection. In the mentor-apprentice relationship, it is possible. Actually, for a mentor, there's nothing more satisfying than seeing someone eventually surpass their own skill. But in the beginning, the two relationships are very similar in the sense that there has to be a foundation of trust. Also, in the mentor relationship, the apprentice doesn't necessarily have to view the mentor as an embodiment of perfection. So, take the music example. Over the years studying with a particular music teacher, there may be aspects to your music teacher's personality that you don't like, or are you would prefer that they didn't get so angry, or that they didn't do this or they didn't do that. But what you're studying is how to be a musician, and so you can put that aside. One of the things I've seen in the United States is what I call a checklist mentality, as people wander from, are searching for a group to study with, and so it's like they go, well, the teacher got angry, that's it, heck with that. One of the strongest things is aesthetic considerations. I really get a kick out of this, because when I was studying with Sun Sanim, sometimes as a group we would go to the movies. So we'd ask them, what kind of movie do you want to go to? Oh, Kung Fu! I want to go to Kung Fu movie. That's and he liked the dumbest Kung Fu movies. Like if there was a choice between a good Kung Fu movie and a really trashy one, you'd go to the trashy one. And he'd be sitting there going, hi, hi, hi. And there were more than a few people who left because that's what he liked, and he loved the Three Stooges, it's like if it was a choice between, I don't know, what's a good TV show, NYPD, right, and the Three Stooges, he'd choose the Three Stooges, every time. So, but that's where he was at. But there's a lot, aesthetics is a very itchy place for people. It's like we all have a strong sense of aesthetics. I know that one of the reasons I was attracted to Zen is aesthetic considerations. I really love that, what I call that serene simpleness. And what other people look at it, they go, it's barren, it's not serene and simple. And it's like when I go into a Chinese Buddhist temple, it's just there's statues and paintings, and it's gold and red, and there's all this stuff, and for me it's kind of cacophonous. It feels kind of cacophonous to me. I'm not comfortable, in that kind of situation. So I'm not dismissing the importance of the aesthetics, but I think you should own that that's your, issue, and not treat it as if it was a fault of the teacher or the community. That's the point I'm making. As you explore various groups and various sanghas, you should be aware of what you can live with and what you can't live with. And another big one is politics, right? So how far, this is an interesting question, how much agreement do you demand on political issues from a spiritual teacher? Robert Aiken tells a really interesting story about, Robert Aiken was deeply involved in the peace movement for many decades. In the 50s, he sailed a boat into where they were doing atomic tests in the Pacific Ocean. So, his commitment was long-term. And, of course, during the Vietnam War, he was deeply involved in the peace movement, for most of us. And so, Robert Aiken's teacher came to Hawaii to lead a retreat. And So everybody was very excited. Oh, we get to meet our teacher's teacher. So this one young man went in for an interview and said that it was in the middle of the Vietnam War, and he had got his draft notice and he wanted to know what to do. And his teacher said, well, if your country calls you, you go. That's it. Like that. And it caused like this great, these ripples through the Sangha. I mean, you can imagine, Robert Aiken and his background, he attracted a very liberal to left following. It's like, how could someone be a Dharma teacher and say that? And, that sort of thing. And that's an interesting question, and it's one which is debated a lot in Western Sanghas. How much agreement? Does your teacher have to be a vegetarian? Does your teacher have to be, have to agree with certain, political stances? Here we are at the Gay Buddhist Sangha. It would be very difficult for one of us to go to a teacher and find out that they were homophobic. I think that would not work. That would not work. So.
Can I interrupt something here? The way I see the teacher here, as it is there, teacher in the college, measured math, history. The person really has knowledge about math and history, and his own personal life doesn't do with what the subject you teach. As a Dharma teacher, to me, mainly teaching about compassion, understanding, spiritual, gentle kindness, the whole thing. Therefore, personally, I can't see any separation of a Dharma teacher behavior and what he teaches. Therefore, that's to me very, very important to me that the Dharma teacher got to have that kind of philosophy, discipline of himself, for me to be able to obey, to teaching. That's why I feel. The same thing, I have a personal experience sometimes. It's a little different from the Tai Chi teacher we had many years ago. He's genius. His form is beautiful. His form just energetic. Something of a teacher. He doesn't have this philosophy as a Tai Chi attitude should be as a teacher. I found myself, every time I go into class, I found myself, instead of relaxing, I came home with a frustration, tenseness. I'm not relaxed now. That's how I see, how I look for a teacher.
I think that's good. Yeah, I like that. Trust your own. Like if you go to a group and you're going home tense every night, that's a good indication to keep looking. Yeah.
But what does it take to be from a student to be a teacher? What does it take? To say I'm now a teacher, I'm a guru. What does it take? Arrogance or enlightenment or try to walk on water, or what does it take? Really?
Well, that varies greatly from school to school. In some Buddhist traditions, say Tendai Buddhism, there's a course of study that you would go through, both academic study, sutra study, and a commentarial tradition, and a meditation program. And upon finishing that program, you would receive a degree.
So it's like a very academic thing too.
Yes, right. A lot of Buddhism, a lot of Buddhist schools are like that. So like a geshe in Tibetan Buddhism is like a doctor of divinity. It means that they've gone through a certain course of study and have become qualified in that manner. One of the interesting things the Dalai Lama said about Americans, he says, he was interviewed about this, he said Americans tend to attach themselves too quickly to a teacher. And said you should hang around for a while, and observe them in many situations. like not just one brilliant Dharma talk, or something like that. Because the relationship, we're talking about a relationship of the heart, and a relationship built on trust, and that happens slowly, that blossoms slowly, over time, and so I would say like trust your intuition, I'm sorry I can't give a simple answer to your questions because it does vary so greatly from school to school.
In the picture or model that you're describing, it seems to me there's a piece that isn't there that in some way fits with where this Sangha in particular is. And it seems to me that both ends of the scale have a presumption of higher or lower. Mm-hmm. The teacher has special knowledge, the guru has special status and being, and perhaps the mentor is closest to this, but there's another kind of role that one can look at, and as I am a teacher myself, not a Buddhism or meditation, that I look at which might be called facilitator, and it's closest to mentor, or perhaps it's close to the friend terminology, in which it's not necessarily presumed that one person overall, or even in a tightly defined area, is higher and the other is lower and needs to elevate, that rather there is a process of sharing, and in some cases it's even, the example that comes to mind is editing somebody else's writing, just because I'm familiar with that. I can probably do it better for you than I can for myself, and you can probably do it better for me than I can for myself, because sometimes it's hard to see these things or to guide ourselves. And it seems to me that what happens to a degree in the Sangha, particularly in the Thursday night group, is really that kind of picture. And the other terminology that I'm familiar with for it comes from the 12-step fellowships, AA and Al-Anon, in which what people do, though there is a mentor role in which it's kind of, I can be for you, you can be for me, or somebody else can, is sharing faith, hope, and experience, which doesn't presume that one person has more of it than the other.
Right, well, actually that was on my list. but no, I mean, I absolutely agree with you on that, the facilitator model. I guess I would have put that under mentor, but I like facilitator, and I agree with you, the 12-step group is the way the 12-step groups transmits the 12 steps is a very good model, like for spiritual communities in general. I like to distinguish, between what I call artificial hierarchies and natural hierarchies. And so I call the artificial one I call hierarchy, and the natural one I call hierophancy. I take my car to a mechanic because I don't know nothing about cars. I mean, actually, I do know. I know how to fix a car. I take it to my mechanic. And he's a very good mechanic, and I trust him. And if he says, you need to do this, I do it. But not because I consider him like a better person or a better human being than myself, but simply because I know he has decades of experience, and that other friends of mine who have gone to that mechanic have never been ripped off. In fact, he's, one time I took my...
What's his name?
He's in Sonoma, unfortunately. But, over the 5 years that I've lived in the city of Sonoma, I've established this relationship with him, but he doesn't consider me a lesser person because I'm a customer. So to me, that's what I call a natural hierarchy. I follow his opinion because I trust him, and that's what I meant by the foundation of trust. That. And once again, if you go, the beginning meditation to me is a real good example of that, because when people first begin to meditate, you're like, what do you mean? This isn't soothing. This isn't calming. This is, and so the person who's been meditating for a long time can communicate. They can say, oh yeah, well, that's right. That's how it usually is at the beginning. You're like, but if you stick to it, then this will happen and this will happen. Does that fit in with what you're talking about? Or,
yes, and there's the piece that what comes to mind is the statement that I believe comes from Suzuki Roshi and also Stephen Levine and no doubt others, is that we're all beginners.
We're all beginners, right.
So there's a certain paradox, which we have to sit with.
Right, but the paradox is resolved in time. Like in that the teacher becomes the student of the student. Or the mentor, the apprentice, has been meditating for 5 years, then the mentor all of a sudden has an experience, and the apprentice goes, oh, well, that's about. And then, if you're in a mentor-apprentice relationship, that's not a problem. There are other models. In a hierarchical model, that is a problem. A hierarchy is usually backed up by the threat of force or intimidation of some kind. That if you break that relationship, well, for example, there's most governmental hierarchies, for example, are backed up by the threat of law enforcement. And so the reason that you pay deference to governmental authorities is because they're backed up by threat. Which is very different from the reason I pay deference to my mechanic. Though the appearance is very similar, the meaning is very different. The key to understanding the difference is that you can leave a hierophantic relationship with no problem on either side. If I decided to go to another mechanic, my mechanic would go, oh well, okay, you can do that. If you leave a hierarchic relationship, there is threat. Okay, now in a religious context, the threat could be, damnation, bad karma in your next life. For countless lives, you will, you'll suffer as an insect. If you leave this, that kind of thing. Does that also fit in with what you're describing? Because one of the things that I think that is very exciting about what is happening in the United States is the development of exactly what you're talking about. This kind of and to me, it's an expression of the Buddhist central insight of interdependence, of that dependent origination. But what I want to communicate to people here, as you go exploring other teachers, this is not a model that has strong resonances among Oriental teachers. They will not understand it. So, for example, one of my teachers, Sensei Nim, he told me explicitly that he was a Confucian, and that is how he organized his temple. His organization was built along Confucian lines. What's interesting about this is that he was willing to transmit the Dharma to a woman, okay? But he was never able to have a woman be an abbot. So, it's the abbot who had, political power within the organization. So isn't that interesting? How he was able, to separate those two functions. And when I asked him about that, he said, he was very clear, which I appreciated. But those of us who are raised in a culture, with democratic tendencies, and egalitarian ideals, will run into that. And so that doesn't mean that your relationship, with the teacher who doesn't understand that point is valueless, but it means that it is something that you will have to consider. Incidentally, I consider the 12-step groups one of the great lights of modern time. I'm not a member of any 12-step group, but when people ask me, it's easy to get pessimistic about the future. But I'm not. And when people ask me why I'm not, I say, well, one of the things I see that I'm very optimistic about is the 12-step groups. The reason is here's an example of people taking into their own hands their own development, okay, outside of the primary institutional contexts of government religion, universities, anything like that. The people have learned, millions of people have learned that they can do that, and I believe that will have a profound effect.
Maybe it's my stereotype, but maybe you could comment on it. Where does the aspect of lay versus monastic practice? I get a sense that as you go towards the Lama Guru end, that it becomes more monastic. And am I I don't know where?
Yeah, I would say that's correct. In Buddhism, there's a long history of debate over the relative status of monastic and lay practitioners. So, in many schools of Buddhism, there's even the view that you cannot become enlightened or even have profound insight as long as you are a lay practitioner. Eventually, you have to become a monastic. What's interesting about this is that there's always been a strong debate about that within the Buddhist community, and if you read the sutras that argue about this, it's very interesting. But, for example, in Theravada Buddhism, there is the strong belief that you have to be monastic. That's also true in Gelugpa Buddhism of Tibet. In order to really accomplish the Dharma, you have to leave home. There are other schools of Buddhism. At the other end would be like Pure Land Buddhism, which is a completely lay-centered practice. Has no monastic tradition at all. So there are models within the history of Buddhism which cover the entire spectrum. It's quite a rancorous issue in the history of Buddhism about what is the status of lay versus monastic. I was a monk for 6 years, and I personally did not find the monastic path conducive to awakening. The Buddhist monastic institution is very busy. It's a very busy place. And if you want to do some reading on this, Thomas Merton is also very good about how monastic institutions have a certain appearance, and then there's a reality behind the appearance. Sangharakshita, also, who is the founder of the organization of this temple, he writes very eloquently about that also. My personal opinion is that, as I said at the beginning, it's in that everyday relationship to people, what Ding Hao was talking about, can compassion and kindness arise, within you in your everyday encounters with people, and that's what, to me, is so favorable about lay practice. Because lay practice offers you 1,000 occasions a day to practice kindness and compassion. So, I work at a bookstore. I've worked in retail for a long time. Working in retail is tough. You get, people come up and they, they're demanding, they're picky. They want a discount they don't get. all that kind of stuff. And every single customer who appears is an opportunity to practice the Dharma. Seriously, I'm serious. In a monastic context, that kind of interaction is removed, you see. And so how do you know that it's not just here? How do you know that it is blossoming here? It's in that daily contact with people. I think it's even more important for teachers to be in that kind of context, because you can really fool yourself when people admire you into thinking that, hey, I really am, and then you reach a point where irritating people are actually a blessing, because they, they present to you, oh yeah, I have more work to do. I have more work to do, because they've shown me that. Does that make sense?
I guess that one end of the spectrum, I like continuum lines because it offers choices to my logical mind, but it also offers choices to the heart. And I could see somewhere between mentoring and guru practice, something I could fit into and look at. But when you say the guru has perfect wisdom, I mean, they're people. They're not gods and saints, and they don't have perfect wisdom. And so I think that's held up as the ideal of a teacher relationship sometimes. And in fact, Trungpa Rinpoche had great wisdom, but I mean, he was addicted to alcohol. He died of alcohol. And I don't think that represents perfect wisdom. So I think the extreme of the continuum line is an ideal that really doesn't exist outside your inner guru that's connected to the universe. So I think for me, the choices are between mentor, somewhere approaching that, so you get a heart-to-heart connection. But I prove great wisdom in people, and I recognize that. But perfect wisdom, I don't think it exists.
I think that it's not that they are perfect, it's more the embodiment of a certain, level of attainment. I don't think that, like in the Tibetan Buddhism that I'm involved with, that we think of our lamas as perfect. I mean, they're absolutely not perfect. But it's to kind of like hype yourself up to get into this state where you can see, the embodiment of, say, a bodhisattva or a figure that they represent or whatever, and then to bring that into yourself so that you can feel like, oh, I can be that way too. But I don't think that I don't think that we're supposed to feel that they're perfect.
Yeah, I'm not choosing sides, really.
Mm-hmm.
Like in my presentation. As I said before, every one of these relationships has their pluses and minuses. It's interesting to me that you brought up Trungpa. Who knows what his ultimate legacy will be? But he certainly is a fascinating example of someone who could brilliantly present the Dharma, and then in his daily life leave quite a wake behind him.
There's several dynamics, and I'll try to make it quick, that I would like all of us to keep thinking beyond today. The challenge of the ego in America, particularly the ego as it is manifested in the male animal in America, despite the color, despite the culture, there's a dynamic that needs to be considered there when the word teacher, mentor, guru is even mentioned. It flames us, because the idea that you need one as a male in a Western tradition is insulting in itself. In its essence, it's insulting, because it presupposes that we don't know something that our ego demands. So that's sort of an amusing conundrum that we have to work on. And the larger contextual issue is appreciative inquiry that says, what about Buddhism? And what about Buddhism? What about teachers in relationship to the larger context of Buddhism, which gives another layer of understanding what the teacher, mentor, guardian, friend is or isn't supposed to do, all of which ultimately gets back to what you brought up before, which is trust. And the challenge for dudes is like, I don't know, should I or shouldn't I? Right. What are you going to do to me if I give up anything to you? And again, my admission is this is a Larry relative perspective, but I found a real powerful one for me in my life, in my search for teachers. I found ultimately that until such time that I arrest those issues that are with me, no one is a good teacher, because I always have that checklist.
The checklist, right? Well, I call that RAM energy. Oh yeah, you know more than I. It's a very good point.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.